As I mentioned at the beginning, we celebrate today the feast of Christ the King. And in a sense, this is different from every other feast we celebrate because this is one that we celebrate looking forward to something that hasn't come yet. It's our faith that trusts that Christ will come again as King of the universe and that he will gather us together. All the other feasts we celebrate during the church year have already happened. This one we still wait for. And so I was debating this past week how to talk about kingship and royalty. Well, when you grow up on the south side of Chicago, you don't know a whole lot about kingship and royalty, believe me. And so I thought I'd try something different. I would like to tell you a fable. I didn't write this. This was written by a Danish philosopher and theologian in the 19th century by the name of Søren Kierkegaard. The story he told was about a king who fell in love with a peasant girl. Now, the king realized that it was virtually impossible for him as a king to marry the girl because she was just a lowly peasant. And kings didn't marry peasants. They rarely even married anybody out of royalty. But this king, being powerful, knew that he could get away with it if he wanted to. And the girl would obviously have to marry him. But the thought occurred to him, if he married this peasant girl and remained king, there would always be this huge gap between them. The girl would always perhaps admire the king, but he didn't think that she'd ever be able to truly love him. The gap would be just too immense to bridge. She would always be conscious of her lowliness, her lowly standing, and that he was royalty. She just a lowly peasant. And so the king decided that wouldn't work, to force her to marry him. And so the king decided something else. He said, well, he would resign his kingship, he would abdicate the throne, and become a lowly peasant himself. And then if he did that, they'd be on a par. And he could marry her and offer his love as one peasant to another. The king realized, of course, that this could all backfire really badly, because he could lose not only his throne and his way of life of privilege, but she might reject him once he was a lowly peasant, thinking him foolish, for why would you want to give up all of this to be in this lifestyle that I'm forced to live? And so the king, as a great understatement, had a problem. What should he do? Well, the king finally decided that he loved this peasant girl so much that he would risk everything to make a true love between them possible. And so he gave up his kingship in order to woo the peasant girl. So, how do you think the story ended? For you romantics out there. Well, first of all, he had two reasons that Kierkegaard used, because he never told us the end of the story. He never did. Sorry. I mean, deal with it, you know. He didn't say whether the peasant girl accepted the love of the king or not. Why? Two reasons. First, the story isn't really about the peasant girl at all. The story is about the king. You recall the story of the prodigal son in the Gospels? That story isn't about the prodigal son. It's about the incredible love of the Father. That's the main character. And so in this fable that Kierkegaard talked about, the girl's not the main character. The main character is the king. Now, the second reason he doesn't give us an ending to the story is that the story isn't finished yet. You see, it's a true story whose ending has not yet been written. As a matter of fact, there are as many endings to this story as there are people in the world. Each one of us writes our own ending. For the king in the story is God, and each of us is that peasant girl. How will your story end? In this feast of Christ the King, we celebrate God's love so incredible, so beyond imagining for each one of us that he would leave the throne of God and come down and share the life of us lowly peasants. That he would abandon for a time his kingship and become one of us to make it easier for us to accept and to respond to his love. The story of God's reaching out to us is an incredible love story. Whether or not it has a happy ending, well, that's up to you.